Thank you so much for showing up at the 9:30 session this morning. I saw a lot of parties going on last night, so kudos to you for being here bright and early. Hope you guys have had a great VMworld. Today we're going to talk about using vRealize with VMware Cloud on AWS. We're going to go through a number of different things within VMware Cloud on AWS and actually go into the console and walk through that, because I'm guessing a lot of you have actually probably seen most of the slides that we see around here. And then we'll pass it on over to Dave, and he'll go through a number of things with vRealize. So just to get started, I'm Brian Graff. I'm the Senior Technical Marketing Manager for VMware Cloud on AWS. Previously, I did Power CLI for VMware for several years, co-authored the Power CLI reference book, 2nd edition, and right before this was the Product Manager for DRS and HA for the vSphere 6.5 release.
My name is David Overbeek. I work at VMware in the management group. I'm a technical director for marketing, focused mostly on vRealize operations, vRealize business for cloud, log insight, etc. We're going to see a lot of those solutions today and how they fit into the VMware Cloud on AWS solution. So the standard disclaimer, we actually don't have a lot of features in this one. What we're going to be showing you is pretty much what you can do out of the box. But if we do accidentally start talking a little bit about futures and fluffy things, you know, there's our disclaimer that covers
Well, and a lot of what we're talking about was either announced last week or on Monday, so it all is very new and everything as well.
Another disclaimer, you can probably hear my voice. I have a pretty good case of the flu. I wasn't even actually sure I was going to make it here. I had a pretty good fever last night, so we're hoping my voice keeps up and stays with it. I'm like pretty doped up on cold medicine, so if I like move my hand in front of my face, I actually see streaks. It's kind of cool. So hopefully we'll be able to make it through the whole thing. So want to focus on the intelligent operations side of vRealize. That includes vRealize business, vRealize operations, etc. And talk about how we can support, and in many cases fully support, VMware Cloud on AWS. And I'm going to try my best to say things like your SDDC cloud, or the SDDC cloud, or the cloud, or VMware Cloud, because saying VMware Cloud on AWS over and over and over again gets a little tedious. So I'll try to shorten it, but just realize as I'm talking about it or mentioning it as an environment, that's what I'm referring to. So we have a number of different categories or features or solutions inside of vRealize that work with your VMware Cloud, including a brand new assessment that was announced and launched last week. We'll be going into that, talking about how we can troubleshoot the VMware Cloud, as well as running capacity and performing capacity management and reclamation. Something that's going to be very important, because now you're renting an environment, and you're going to want to make sure you're getting the most out of that environment and using it in the most efficient way. We're also going to be talking about vSAN and how that's something new. How many people here have vSAN today? So quite a few,
yeah.
Right? When you get VMware Cloud on AWS, you'll be taking your first steps into vSAN. vRealize helps you with that by providing you an easy, out-of-the-box native solution for vSAN management. As well as being able to extend your visibility into the Amazon AWS services. So for instance, like the Amazon RDS services, those are things you're going to want to be able to take advantage of. How do you connect that into your VMware Cloud without losing that visibility and still being able to manage those services that are not really running on quote-unquote vSphere? So we'll be covering all of that. One of our goals with this session was to have the least amount of slides of any session here. So we're going to be mostly demoing, some live demos, some canned demos, etc. But we're going to try to limit the amount of slides to probably about 5 or 6 total, including the thank you and the question slide, I think. So with that,
yeah,
no
thanks,
pressure.
Dave. So just real quick, I want to kind of gauge the room, because I don't want to be talking about things that are items that you already know about or have already discussed so far this year. So just show of hands really quickly. How many of you have already been to another VMware Cloud on AWS session this week? Awesome. We can toss half of my slides. How many of you personally are using or have used AWS services? Okay, great. All I'm going to say on this slide is it's kind of a no-brainer, right? It's been a binary choice for our customers as far as where do we deploy our workloads, who controls them, who's taking care of the resources. Up until now, it's been something that businesses have had to really cringe and make these critical decisions on which path do we take. Do we stay on-prem with VMware? Do we go to the cloud with Amazon? And most companies are doing both. But when you do both, you end up splitting systems, you have even more silos. There's a number of issues there. And that's one of the things that we aim to conquer here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just throw up this slide here really fast, and we're going to talk about this slide for just a few minutes. And then I think with the number of you that have already seen these slides and know a bit about what we're talking about here, we'll just jump right into the service itself through the browser. So, for all of you that have on-prem data centers, you're here on the left column, right? That's you, that's your on-prem, you manage your servers, you manage everything. They are your pets, you take care of them, you get called in the middle of the night if something happens to them. The far right side is your Amazon side. This is where you split if you're using VMware or if you're using Amazon. If you're using Amazon, you're far right, and you're using things like EC2 AMIs, S3 buckets, RDS, you name it, okay? Right in the middle is VMware Cloud on AWS. And I just want to point out a couple things and why this is such an interesting product or offering that you're getting. This is not us just slapping VMware vSphere into the cloud. There's a number of different things that we're able to take advantage of because we're running in Amazon's cloud that differentiated us from even being VMware running on any other cloud that's out there or partner. Okay? First thing I want to say here is that VMware Cloud on AWS is a service. It's a managed hosted service by us. So all of a sudden, all those crazy nights where you have to stay up patching or patching goes wrong, you know, firmware updates, all that is not your problem anymore with VMware Cloud on AWS. Okay? I said this in one of my other sessions and like 18 people cheered. They were like, I don't have to do this ever again. This is all billed to you by VMware. The hardware for VMware Cloud on AWS, the software, the support, and the management. That's all done by VMware through HPP and SPP credits. Okay, one bill, one support number, it all goes through VMware. It will tie into your own AWS accounts, right? It has to tie in and link to your own VPC, and we can talk about that in a few slides and why that's important. But this will also, if you're getting public IPs or have egress charges from VMware Cloud on AWS, that's actually billed to you through your other AWS account. So any add-ons that you have there, if you're tying in other integrations with VMware Cloud on AWS, that's going to go through your current master payer already, okay? As you can see here, that gold line, right, underneath VMware Cloud on AWS and the AWS services is key. So this is all bare metal. We're not running nested virtualization. But because we are running in different regions within AWS's data centers, which right now we're only in Oregon, but you'll see us expanding out to different regions very quickly, with the next one being US East to Virginia, we can take advantage of the AWS services natively from within the VMs. And I'll actually show a live demo of us doing that over here later in this session. But all of a sudden, you can start taking advantage of things like local traffic to your S3 buckets. Okay, we have a high bandwidth, low latency connection between VMware Cloud on AWS and all of those services that you're already consuming. What that means now is, you know, many people are pushing backups to S3 buckets because it's cheap storage, right? The problem is if you ever need those backups, you've got the egress charges and it takes a while to download. There's a number of issues of if I actually do need to recover from this, it's going to cost us a bit of money and it's going to take a while. Because VMware Cloud on AWS is in that same region and in that same data center, all the traffic's east-west. You don't have egress charges all of a sudden. And you don't have a slow bandwidth, you know, a slow issue bringing those back down. So if you're going to recover to VMware Cloud on AWS, all of a sudden, you don't have these additional egress charges and you can recover very, very quickly. So all of a sudden it gets our customers thinking, whoa, so outside of the traditional IT, or the way that we've done this over the last 9 or 10 years, how can I start integrating with some of these AWS services with my VMware VMs, okay? And I'll show actually a demo of us going through having our front-end VMs sitting in VMware, connecting to an RDS database through local traffic, not publicly accessible. Anyways, by the way, this is a smaller group in a very large room. We would love questions. If you have questions, feel free to come up to the mics. Even during our session, come up to the mics and we'll answer those questions. I want this to be something that is very time well spent for all of you. So let's make sure that we answer the questions that you guys have. All right. I think I will skip the other slides here. I will just touch on one more here.
Just because he toggled through them doesn't mean we showed them.
We did not show those.
Those don't count.
We're on slide 3, okay?
So if somebody's counting and going, that's 7, 8, 9, that does not count. Those were skipped.
So, like I said, VMware, it's not like we're just slapping vSphere into the cloud, okay? 2 of the benefits that I wanted to talk about, because as I mentioned before, I was the product manager for DRS and HA for about 18 months. Currently in your own data centers, you generally have additional capacity in each of your clusters, right? DRS is in there. You can load balance your workloads around. You're probably running vRealize operations, which allows you to balance outside of clusters as well, intercluster. But you have additional capacity for those times where you need to balance a little bit more, as well as for those just in case times when you have a host failure. Right? So you've paid for another host, you've paid for the contracts, you're paying for server maintenance, you're paying for heating and cooling for those just in case moments. With VMware Cloud on AWS, you get 4 hosts right out the door, but we also go and do things like you can see here. We will monitor those hosts, and if we detect any reason to think that one of these hosts is going bad, we actually just call an API in the back end. It goes out into Amazon's cloud, grabs another big host for us, brings it in, slaps on the configuration, and starts to sync the vSAN data store. All behind the scenes. Once that sync's done, if we still deem that that one host is bad, we rip it out and throw it back to Amazon and say, hey, you guys can go ahead and fix that, replace the hard drive or whatever it is whenever you want. It can be tomorrow, it can be 6 months from now, but it's not the customer's problem anymore. So all of a sudden, in the back end of this, you're not paying for that additional capacity for those just-in-case moments, right? This will spin up a new host in anywhere between 6 and 10 minutes at this current point in time, okay? So all of a sudden, you're only paying for the resources that you need. Question?
Brought this up from...
Yeah, all the way in, please.
So you brought this up from the standpoint of an outage. What I'm wondering, though, is just capacity in general. So we would plan cluster capacity with an N-1.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in part, that's for maintenance, right?
Yes.
Doing host patching. How would that work with this? Should we say, you know what, I've got full capacity of 4 hosts, or should we say, no, you still have to plan for 3 because you're going to be patching on the back end?
Great question. What was your name?
Kurt Bowman.
Kirk, thank you. So you are now in the VMware session. You've been recorded. You're famous. Great question. So what we have is something called Elastic DRS. Now, you can plan however you want. You get a 4-host minimum. And these hosts are big, okay? So just to put this into perspective, these hosts each have dual 18-core processors. They each have half a terabyte of RAM, and they each have 16 terabytes of NVMe storage, okay? They're beefy, they're fast, they're awesome. Usable storage with vSAN and everything is about 10.7 terabytes per host. So keeping that in mind, you can say, how much additional storage do I want to have in there as kind of a reserve, right? Or how dense am I willing to run this before I want an additional host in the cluster, okay? So we have something called Elastic DRS. You can go in and set thresholds on the different resources, CPU, memory, RAM, and say, if any of these resources go above the specific thresholds that I've put for a certain amount of time, go ahead and grab another host and slap it into my cluster, okay? So all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about 3 months or 6 months in advance ordering hardware and making sure that you have it racked and stacked in time before you run out of capacity. Does that make sense? So conversely, well, and I'll finish off saying, you're only paying for it once it comes into your cluster, right? So once again, you're paying for this as needed. Conversely, you can set thresholds for the minimum side. So let's say that you got some flex capacity here. You shrink your resources down, either you're powering down VMs, you are doing dev tests, you've deleted things, whatever it may be. This can also say, hey, you went below a certain threshold, okay, for a certain amount of time, let's kick a host or 2 hosts out, and then you're not paying for those either. Did that answer your question? Sort of, kind of? Okay.
So yes, that's really good to know. The only thing I'm still uncertain about is, how does patching occur? or not how does it occur, how does it impact the capacity?
Okay.
Because obviously you're taking a host down. Is that, while that host is down, are you not paying for it? Is that kind of following with the elastic DRS you're talking about?
Okay, got it, yeah. So there's a number of different things that go on with patching. One of the things that I want to stress is with all of this, we've had a number of people that say, I want to know the nitty-gritty on everything, when, how, etc. We also have to think of this as from an as-a-service standpoint. You don't go and do all this with Amazon or Azure or any other SaaS product that you're using. You don't ask for the behind the scenes, right? That being said, we make sure that you have the resources that you need for the entire time during the management, during the maintenance and patching. Now, whether that's us adding in another host temporarily while we take one down or whatever that is, we take care of that, and that doesn't impact you guys. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and jump right into the console. You guys want to see the thing? Okay, let's do this. Live demos. Live demo gods, please don't let this fail here. We all know what happens with live demos. Okay, so this is me. I just logged in beforehand because I didn't want you to see my, my email and password, right? But I am logged in now. This is the VMware Cloud on AWS console. So there's two parts to this. One, you have your host, you have your vCenter, right? And all that's running. And it's pretty much the same as what you have on-prem. When I log into vCenter server here in just a minute, you're going to say, this doesn't really look any different. And it's really not, right? It's everything around that. There are a few differences. But the main difference here is that we have this console. And from here, you can do several different things. So I am part of, hello. As you can see up here, this says Brian Graff's organization. So when you go in and you first create an account with VMware Cloud on AWS, you're given an organization. It's just a logical grouping here. Okay, so think of it as a way for you to add members to your team that can manage your SDDCs. Okay, so here's my organization, and I went ahead already and deployed an SDDC, and we can see some of the utilization. Now, deploying an SDDC, if I create one, there's a few things that happen here. Like I said, you have to first off create an account link, which is pretty much automated. You do like 2 clicks, you log in with your AWS account, it'll deploy a CloudFormation stack into your own AWS account, and you're good to go, okay? So you have to create that link first off, which has already been done. I don't have to do it ever again. I can see it here. I hit next, and it goes, give me an SDDC name. What is it going to be named? Well, my other one was TMM SDDC, Technical Marketing Manager SDDC. So I can give this any name that I want. I can say VMworld 2017. I can choose the number of hosts, but once again, I can make this, I can expand it or contract as long as I have a minimum of 4, so I can stay with just 4. Currently, we're only in US West Oregon, so as we start rolling out to other regions, you'll be able to choose those here. And here's where that account linking comes into play. So, because I've linked my AWS account, this goes out and queries and says, which VPC in your AWS account is this going to be tied to? And that's for a number of different reasons I'm not going to get into because we want to focus on vRealize. But we do have sessions on this 3:30. It's called Intriguing Integrations with VMware Cloud on AWS, S3, EC2, Lambda, more. It's a huge mouthful. Just look up Intriguing or Graph 3:30 today. We'll go deeper into this. I can choose my VPC and the subnet, which is the availability zone where this is going to be placed. Hit next. I give it a management CIDR, right, that doesn't conflict with my on-prem, because if I connect this with VPN, I want to actually be able to route between the two. And then I hit deploy. Now, I'm not going to hit deploy right now because it will fail because I was only given space for 1 SDDC in my account because they don't want me charging lots of money. But that's how you deploy. It takes about 90 minutes for that whole deploy process to occur, and then you get this dashboard. We good so far? Talking kind of fast because I want to give time over to Dave here in just a minute. Clicking onto my SDDC, I can see my dashboard again, but I also see 3 tabs over in the left side. So I've got summary, I've got additional network, connection info, and support. I'm going to start from the right and work my way back. So support is kind of cool here. Traditionally, you have an issue, you contact GSS either through a phone call or through email. Here we can get information very quickly about my vCenter, the UUID of my org and my SDDC that are potentially the issue, and some other information that support might need. We've got a nice little intercom button down here where I can go ahead and immediately start talking with GSS. And what's really cool about this is in VMware Cloud on AWS, we have this integrated with the H5 client as well. So it's not just here It's when you log into your H5 client and you're in vCenter, if you have any issues or problems or questions, you click that intercom button, you're directly sent to GSS, and they can answer your questions immediately right there. So all of a sudden, you've got this very quick, tight integration with support if needed. From a connection info standpoint, I have my quick links to my vCenter server, to the API Explorer, because all this is REST-based. So if you guys are the type that like to do scripting and APIs, you can do that from here, okay? Or you can at least go to the API Explorer and see what your options are. There's also a way for you to grab the PowerCLI snippet. You just click that, paste it into PowerShell, and it'll connect you to vCenter. And default username and password for vCenter for logging in before you've set up SSO and everything for your accounts. The final thing I'll show you in this area is the networking side. Okay? There's two different sides to this. There's a management, which is on top, and a compute that's on bottom. Management has your vCenter, NSX, vSAN, ESX hosts. It's locked down quite a bit. The compute is where all of your workloads will be. Okay? And this is done logically through NSX. So technically, these are two NSX edges in highly available mode. And you can see on the right-hand side that I have VPNs connected to my on-prem data center. Okay? So all of a sudden, because I have my management VPN up, I can do things like use VMRC and remote console my VMs. I can do cold migrations. I would technically be able to do vMotions, and I can manage both environments from the same H5 client. Because I have compute VPN up, my VMs on both sides can talk to each other. Simple enough. We can go down a little bit below, and we'll come down here to the compute side. We can see all the logical networks that I've created and their CIDR blocks. Okay, this is all done with NSX in a very simple way in the H5 client. So we can see these are essentially port groups for your VMs to be attached to. The firewall rules to allow traffic in and out either between VMs here, between your on-prem and VMC, or between AWS, EC2, whatever, and your VMs here. And then things such as NATing, DNS, and public IPs. Public IPs, you essentially click this button, request public IP, it'll go out to Amazon, grab one for you, and you're able to use it. Cool? All right, everything else essentially from here on out, if I were to jump into vCenter, it would look pretty much like what you're using already. So I'm going to turn the time over here to
Great.
Dave, and let you start going through your vRealize stuff. How's that sound?
That's great. I'm going to do you a solid, and I'm going to
Thank you.
do this
and I'll make sure I stand on the other side of this. Stay away from me.
before touching your...
Any questions so far before Dave jumps into the vRealize portion? Run up to the mic.
Hey, this is Tom. Is NSX required on your private site?
Great question. NSX is not required on-prem. So to do this, as long as you have an IPsec layer 3 VPN connectivity from your on-prem side, you can VPN up to VMware Cloud on AWS. Obviously, if you have NSX, you can use your NSX Edge on-prem to connect as your terminating point on your on-prem, but it's not necessary. Great question. All right, Dave, take it away.
Thanks. So one of the first things that you would want to do before even moving on to VMware Cloud on AWS is do an assessment. How much do I need? What are the good things to bring over? So we're going to go through a number of different demonstrations here, getting you through stage 1 all the way through managing AWS native services using vRealize. This is your on-prem vRealize implementation. So this would be VROps, VRBC, et cetera, running on-premise, pointing to the cloud. So, I watched the demonstration the other day where, the gentleman on stage, used hybrid link mode and said, look, here's my vCenter, and there's the, my vCenter on the AWS side, and watch this, click, and then it all, columned up, and everyone's like, ooh, and I'm like, that's great. It's the same thing with vRealize operations, right? So we'll see that throughout this demo. But first, let's start with the assessment. So like I said, the assessment tool just recently released. It's part of vRealize Business for Cloud. You'll go down here to the What If Analysis tab, and you'll see there's a new VMware Cloud assessment feature. Now, I've started this particular assessment because I didn't want to spend a lot of time clicking all the buttons. I just want to give you kind of the feel. There's two ways to do this assessment, and they kind of fit really well with the two different use cases or two different ways customers look at using AWS. They either want to move applications and services over, or they're looking to retire specific hardware. So they may have a cluster that's very, very, very old hardware. They're not going to be, you're not going to be upgrading the service support contract with that particular hardware, and you're looking to retire that. And instead of purchasing more hardware, AWS is a really good opportunity for you to go into a different direction and get out of that hardware support. So let's start with the application. So I can easily click my selected application, and those applications are actually being pulled in from vCenter. They're either tags, how many of you guys use vSphere tags, or vSphere folders, right? Everybody does, right? So you drop a whole bunch of stuff into a folder, you tag a whole bunch of things. That's where this is coming from, right? So you can see I've got 10 virtual machines in my business critical app folder. I also have my Exchange server and it's set up. I can easily grab those too, and it's now bringing over those 14 extra virtual machines. The other way I can do this is I can do it by bringing over an entire sets of clusters, right? So I'll select the data center. In this case, I'm going to select the Management West data center, which is one of my data centers. And I'm going to select the West Compute cluster. And here I can go, and now I can actually choose specific VMs from that cluster. Hey, I only want to bring over the VMs that Tom owns, so let's grab all those VMs. Or I want to bring over specific VMs. In this case, though, I'm going to bring over everything. I'm actually retiring that cluster. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and retire that entire data center. I'm going to bring over the West Management as well and select them. Now, if I scroll down, you can see all the different data store cluster combinations have been chosen. Right? So we've got all of those different virtual machines ready to come over. If I click the Run Scenario button, I'm given all the information I need to be able to make an intelligent decision, both from a cost and how many hosts I'm going to need over in the VMware Cloud. I can even get a quick overview of how many virtual machines. It looked like it was 278. Here's all the virtual machines. I can then say, oh, I don't want to bring that one, remove it, etc. But let's take 2 seconds and let's look at what we've got here. So you've got two sides. You've got your private cloud side on the left, and you've got your VMware Cloud and AWS on the right. Okay? The private cloud is giving you the analysis of all those 278 virtual machines you've selected. It gives you the allocated capacity, CPU, memory, storage. It also gives you the utilized capacity, right, from a CPU, memory, and storage standpoint. And then it gives you a cost, right? And people are going to look at that and go, where does that cost come from? That cost is based on amortized rates of the hardware that those clusters are running on, power, cooling, support, etc. Right? So it's using common terms and common numbers, right, for the industry to provide you a basis cost of how much these 278 VMs are costing you on a monthly basis. That's the most important number to me, right? That's the one where I can do a comparison now. So now if I go over to the AWS side, now the AWS side, I'm actually using the utilized capacity. So I'm taking this middle row here and saying, okay, if I was to move these 270 virtual machines over, how many hosts would I need? It's saying I need 4. Well, that is the minimum, right? I have to purchase 4 hosts. And you can see based on the blue is showing you how much of those hosts I'm filling up. So I'm basically filling up 2/3 of those hosts, right? The overall cost for 4 hosts is shown here on the far right. So depending on whether I'm doing it per month, per 1-year contract, or per 3-year contract, you can see those prices go down. And then I'm basically giving you okay, for those VMs though that you're moving over, what is the cost of them? What is the cost of moving those 278 VMs? Yes, you're going to be paying this much a month, but those particular VMs are going to be taking up this much of that cost. So we have some space available, that's the white above. Right? So now you can start doing really quick cost comparisons. Well, it's going to cost me $18,000 if I leave these here per month versus, as low as $8,000 when you start looking at a 3-year contract.
So Dave, quick question for you. Does this also take into account like the VMware loyalty program discounts of if you're a current vSphere provider and stuff, as well as that additional percentage in here, or are these the base rates? So could it be even lower?
It could be even lower, right? Okay. So again, I'm not trying to be like a car salesman or anything. Oh, it could be even lower, but wait, there's more. But yeah, actually, it's not part of this demo. I didn't want to get into too much detail, but there's a couple of buttons down here at the very bottom that says, edit my percentage, edit my loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. You can also change it You can also configure it so that it will give you a different number here if you have different types of rates for hardware, et cetera, that are not part of the industry standard. So yeah, you can tweak this up. What we recommend though is reaching out to your SEs and your account reps and saying, look, I'm interested in VMC. I'd like to have a VMC specialist come out, a VMware Cloud specialist come out and talk to me about VMware Cloud on AWS. And this will be one of the tools they bring with them. Right? They'll drop it into your environment, and within an hour, they'll spin it up and say, okay, what are you guys interested in moving over? I'm interested in doing this. It'll generate this report for you. They can hand you the report. Any questions on that? So the next stage after you've purchased VMware Cloud, right? You've purchased it, you've done the assessment, is to start moving over applications and or services. What we're looking at here is vRealize Network Insight. Has anybody seen vRealize Network Insight before? Good, excellent. Good. So this will be a pretty quick demonstration of what it can do for you. So vRealize Network Insight is looking at NetFlow data and analyzing that to show who's talking to what and how often are they having a conversation and how much data is actually going through. So I'm going to go to the microsegmentation side, and I'm going to choose an application to bring over and analyze that particular application to see how it would look. Does it make sense for me to bring that application over into VMware Cloud? So let's go ahead and select my primary sales app. Again, this is done by tags, right? I've tagged this application. I've said this is this application, and then the NetFlow data is then analyzed to say, well, yeah, you've got the application, but the question is what else is it talking to? If I pick this thing up and move it out to the cloud, am I missing this huge amount of bandwidth between something else in my private data center? I want to bring this service over, this application over as a whole, not as pieces. Go ahead and hit Analyze. And we can quickly see that I have a web tier here with one VM in it talking to the internet. Internet traffic is coming into that particular web tier. That web tier is then talking to the two application servers. I think you guys can see that, I hope. And then that application tier is talking to my backend database. I can even clean it up a little bit more and say, let's just look at, instead of looking at it by each tier, let's just look at it as a whole application. And you can see the application pretty much has that little circle here is showing that it's talking to itself, which is what we would expect. Those different VMs are all having conversations, but they're also talking to different things within my virtual data center and my physical data center. The question I have is, how much? Is there a huge backup that runs every night where I'd be wasting, money if I pushed it up into the cloud and then have this egress cost coming back down all the time? These are questions that you'd want to answer before moving this application. So let's go ahead and click on this and let's get into some of the details. So the first tab here shows the services associated with this application itself. Okay? So you can see I have a web server that's providing port 80 HTTP. I have a couple of application services servers that are providing HTTPS services, and I have a backend database, which in this case is MySQL. I can also look, and you can see the total amount of information that's going through there, right? So it's quite a busy little application. This is in a 24-hour period, right? And you can see the high and the low, et cetera. So it looks like it's having a pretty good conversation with itself, this application. The question is, what else is it talking to? So here's the list of the 4 that it's already talking to within itself. What else is it talking to? It's got some DNS. I know I was poking at it personally, doing SSH, and we were doing other HTTP checks internally, et cetera. So there's some other traffic going on, but you can see that traffic is pretty minimal, right? We're talking about kilobytes versus gigabytes. So right there, it kind of starts looking like this might be a pretty good application as a whole, and it sounds like I've got most of the application pretty well tagged already, right? I can even go into the next level of detail and say, okay, look, I really want to go to each single flow. Show me every single flow. Does it have a specific spike? Is there a specific time frame? This could even help me, Ryan, it could even help me decide when I want to move the application, right? If I look at this and I say, geez, it's really busy, but then every Saturday it gets really quiet. Maybe that's the time I bring it down or bring it over.
Definitely.
Right? So you can see here I've got my sales web talking to my app server. I can see the total details, the amount of ports. Again, this is not saying, vRealize Network Insight is not going to tell you, this is a good app to move to the cloud. It's going to give you the information you need to make that business decision, right? And make sure you're not leaving anything behind. Any questions on that? Doing okay so far, guys?
Awesome.
Great. So let's go over to vRealize Operations, okay? How many people here have vRealize operations today? Great. You'll be happy to know vRealize operations fully supports VMware Cloud and AWS. And it's literally as easy as hybrid link mode. In fact, shockingly so, where you're going to look at this go, yeah, okay. You know, it's almost like no news in some senses, right? So you can see how many people have had a chance to play with vRealize Operations 6.6. Shameless plug, sorry. Shameless plug, please get down to the booth, go look at vRealize Operations 6.6. It is a game changer. It is a total different feel. So anybody who feels like coming up and giving a testimonial about how great it is, please feel free to do so.
Dave's not biased at all, by the way.
Not at all.
But
not at all.
I agree with him, and I'm not in that side, so.
But you can see here, I've got my different vCenters, and the vCenter that I've added recently is my VMware Cloud vCenter, owned by my friend Eric. If I go ahead and click that one, you can see I've now updated the screen, and I can see my one cluster, my 5 hosts, even my virtual machines that are running up there in the cloud, right? So complete visibility across both my private and my VMware Cloud. You have a question.
This doesn't look any different than a regular vCenter.
Exactly, right? That's the whole point. Is like it's kind of like like I said, like almost a no news. It's great news, but it's not like, oh, look at the difference, right? That's the whole point. Is what you're using today is going to work the same way.
We lost the screen. Try. There we go.
Got it.
Be careful with air. You know what? Keep going.
Okay. So if I go to the dashboards tab, this is we have a question. Make it an easy one. Remember, I'm sick.
So, were you still using an on-prem VROps?
I'm still using an on-prem VROps. Yes.
Okay, but wouldn't that up your egress charges? Wouldn't it be better to have something out in cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done any analysis on how much that would cost. It's not bringing back tons and tons and tons of data, right? It's bringing back a small amount of data each time. The amount of metrics that we're bringing back is getting lesser and lesser each time as we realize, geez, we have all these metrics and we don't use half of these and people don't look at them, so we're shortening that list. That's probably something we should do, is a bit of analysis on how much that would cost. Do you have any feel for egress costs back into the data center?
I mean, it all depends on each customer and the rates that they've got with Amazon and stuff. What I would say is, A, you could run this in VMware Cloud on AWS, right? It doesn't have to be on-prem. The reason I think why we're going this route is because most people already have that on-prem. Now, egress charges, if you are doing kind of a hybrid scenario like this is going to be just minuscule compared to any other type of traffic. Like the aggregate amount of traffic and egress that you would have between a fully hybrid data center environment. So I can't give you like exact numbers, but between, what was it, VROps 5.7, there was a 5.7, right? And 6.6, there's been a decent amount of change as far as how much data is being collected and brought down, like Dave said.
But I'll take that back, and we'll try to do some kind of a white paper on that. That does make sense.
If you want to come over afterwards as well, we can get your information. We can reach back out to you after as well when we get that.
So this is the new Getting Started page in vRealize Operations 6.6. And it's about as simple as it can get. Across the top, you can see those are functions or personas. Am I the capacity person? Am I the compliance person? Am I trying to do troubleshooting today? Clicking on any of those tabs at the top will bring you to a list of dashboards. And those dashboards have questions on it. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to reclaim capacity? Are you trying to troubleshoot a host? Are you trying to troubleshoot a cluster? Once you click on those, it'll bring you actually to a workflow that'll walk you through step by step how to solve this problem. So it's a big change in the way we used to have. So if you're familiar with operations previously, it was, hey, we're going to give you a lot of information. You click around and figure out what's wrong. We actually built these new dashboards with customers. So we went to customer sites, we built a dashboard, then we carried that to the next customer, et cetera, until it was fine-tuned and ready to go. So the ones I want to focus on today is the operations. Actually, we're going to focus on a lot of these today, but the first one I want to focus on is the operations overview. To me, this is that knock wall view, right? And you can see here's the number of data centers, here's the number of hosts, the clusters, and it's including the VMware Cloud. In fact, if I click on my SDDC data center, that's actually the name of the data center that I created in the VMware Cloud. If I click on that, you can see it'll update, right? So I can give an overall health of that cloud environment, the number of alerts, and really a top 15 of contention, memory, disk latency, et cetera, right? So a really high-level overview of what's going on in that particular environment. If I go back to the dashboards.
Am I still on? Sec. Thank you. Sorry.
Like, I'm hearing voices. That can't be good, right? This is the best cold medicine ever. Wow, now I'm hearing voices. The other thing that's fun, and again, you can see there's host usage overview and optimized vSAN deployments overview. vSAN is a native component of VROps now, right? So it is a first-class citizen. So if you have vSAN, you have VROps, this is the kind of stuff. We worked with the vSAN team to build these dashboards and build these functionality. But one of the things you can do is you can get a quick overview of the vSAN environment, right? Again, I'm going to go ahead and click on the cluster that is my particular cluster running in that cloud. And it's going to update to show, there's my 5 hosts. There's the number of different sets of details considering, the storage usage, how much have I used, and, latency, and, IOPS, and throughput, et cetera, right? So again, another quick overview of that environment. So the purpose of this first little foray into ops was to say, look, it's in there, right? It's in there just like any other environment, whether it would be in Pittsburgh, in your private data center, or up in the cloud. So let's go ahead and try to manage some performance and do some troubleshooting in that environment quickly. So to do troubleshooting, I'm going to go ahead and click on the troubleshooting tab, or the troubleshooting icon here, and you can see troubleshoot a cluster, troubleshoot a data store, troubleshoot a host. Well, most of the time I'm going to be troubleshooting VMs, so let's go ahead and troubleshoot a VM. In this particular story, someone's calling me up and saying, look, we've got this computational service that we do for protein genes, the folding, whole idea of that. And we've noticed that recently we're getting less and less information each night when we run this through. We think things are slowing down. You got to help us, right? And that you always get that phone call. So I'm going to go ahead, since I know what that setup is, and put in the fold and bring up that particular VM. Now that VM, as you can see, is running in the VMware Cloud, right? It's just there. I can get information about the VM, how much memory does it have, what's the guest, what are the versions of the tools, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see there's numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is one of those new flows, right? This is a brand new dashboard with a new flow. Basically, start at number 1, put in the VM you think that's having a problem or people are complaining about, go to number 2, go to number 3. Most of the time you're going to stop at 3 because that's where the alerts are, and you're going to see right there I've got a number of alerts. I'm going to keep going so I can show you a little bit more of the flow, but then we're going to go back to the top and we're going to fix that problem. So if I scroll down, I can see in number 4, is this a VM that's having just a random spike here, or is this a continuous problem? Well, except for Friday, which I actually had it off on Fridays, don't ask why. Monday through Thursday, it seems to be working really hard. I can also look at what is it related to. So there's my VMware Cloud on AWS host that it's running on. That seems to be green. There's the vSAN data store that it's running on, also seems to be green, though don't seem to have any alerts or problems. The VM itself, red, right? As I continue through this, it's going to say, well, what's the next thing you should check for this VM? Well, let's see. Is it spiking or acting abnormally? Right? Nope, seems pretty consistent for both, memory, CPU, et cetera. Is it facing contention? Well, it's had a couple of little blips here, but we're talking about 0.1, 0.2. That's not too bad at all, right? So I continue through this process, getting to number 8, number 9. Does the cluster that's serving this particular VM have any problems? No, it looks like the cluster is pretty good. I've got some waviness there with some contention, but again, really minor stuff. And yeah, there was a bit of a jump here in the latency, but that was a while back, so it doesn't seem like that's an issue. Again, this is to help you troubleshoot that VM issue. Now, again, I would have stopped myself at number 3 and said, look, I've got 2 CPU errors here. One saying that this thing's always running hot. In fact, even in the last 24 hours, it's hotter than normal, right? Go ahead and click on that particular alert. First thing it says is contact your administrator. Since this is an abnormal amount of CPU, contact the line of business owner for this particular computational VM and say, what are you doing? Oh yeah, we opened it up to about 100 more users last week. We didn't tell you. Well, there's your problem, right? So let's go ahead and go to the recommendation. The recommendation says to run this action and go from one CPU, which is pretty small for a computational server, but again, I'm sharing this environment, to go to 2 CPUs. I can just go ahead and say I'm going to make a snapshot of that environment, go ahead and begin that action. It would then go off to the vCenter in VMware Cloud, change that, take the snapshot, bring that back online. Right? Solve that problem. So that's how you can solve a simple VM problem. And again, that same flow works on VMware Cloud the same as it would in your private data center. Let's go ahead and quickly, how much time do we have? You know what, I'm going to go ahead and go to capacity. So let's go to the capacity story. The other one I was going to show you is how to troubleshoot a vSAN environment. The nice thing about that, and it's actually one of my favorite dashboards, so apologies I'm not going to get to it. It actually walks you through what's the health of the vSAN cluster, what are the health of the disk groups, what is the health of the hosts, and all the way down to what is the health of the actual drives themselves, the flash drives. So you can actually get all that information so that you can have a conversation. Now, some of those pieces are going to be, the drives look like they're having issues. That would be something where you could probably, that would be something you would pick up the phone or click the button and say, hey, support, I'm noticing these issues in my VROps system. I would like you to, swap this host out, swap out these drives, whatever it would be. So let's go to capacity. I'm going to create a quick capacity overview, and I'm going to go ahead and choose my vCenter, and you can see there's a quick overview of how much capacity I have in the VMware Cloud and how much I'm using. Right? Again, this is the total capacity of my entire environment, everything put together, but this is just showing me the VMware Cloud. Okay? I can also get trend views, so if I add another host, you'll see it jump up. If I add a lot of more workloads, you'll see it jump up. If I reclaim a bunch of capacity, it'll jump down, right? And so this is something where you can watch your trends and you can say, geez, we're going up and up and up. I think it's going to need to be, I think we're going to need to purchase another host on VMware Cloud soon, right? And that could be something you do. And we didn't even talk about capacity planning, but that of course works as well with VMware Cloud and AWS. So let's go ahead and go to one of my favorite dashboards for, how many times have I said that? One of my favorite dashboards, one of the most important dashboards you're going to have for your VMware Cloud environment, and that's reclaiming capacity. It's one thing when you've purchased the host and you're wasting capacity and you've over-provisioned and you've got snapshots, et cetera, out there. That's one thing. You're renting this environment. You really want to run this as efficiently as possible, and vRealize operations can help you do that. So you can see I've clicked on my VMware Cloud environment, and it gives a quick overview of how much capacity can I reclaim in that environment, both CPUs, memory, and storage. What's nice about this new dashboard, if you're familiar with the old way we did it, was now we would tell you all this information, and then we wouldn't let you do anything in that dashboard. It was the worst idea ever, right? Everything's here, right? So I would like to start reclaiming. Right? So all I need to do is just go over to the next dashboard or the next widget next to it and say, look, there's this particular VM here. It's telling me I should be able to reclaim disk space from this. I happen to be short on disk space right now. I'm a little worried in that VMware Cloud environment. So let's go ahead and do some reclamation. Come up here, and in this case, I'm just going to delete some unused snapshots. Go back 2 days old, go back 20 days old, however you want. In this case, I'm just going to go back 2 days old, click next, and you can see it's found one snapshot out there. It's about 10 gig. And I'm going to decide that I can remove that. Right? Click the button to begin the action. It goes out and removes that snapshot. I've just gained back 10 gig of space. The other things you can do is looking at reclamation of, and we do this now by large VMs. We're no longer telling you, you can look at it, but you got to scroll down the list. We're no longer telling you, hey, you've got a 2 CPU machine and you can get back 1 CPU. Boring. Give me the ones that are 16 and 20 CPU machines and I can reclaim 16 or 15 CPUs. That's much more interesting. So you'll see there's actually one here on both the CPU and on the memory. It's the same VM. It was way oversized on purpose for this particular environment so that it would show up on this list. And I can go up here now and I can do a reclamation. I can do a set the CPU and memory count for this VM. It's going to give you an automatic, hey, it was 8, we recommend 4. And it's saying you have 40 gig, we recommend 12. I'm going to go and make that nice and even, make it 20. take a snapshot, begin that action. Right? It's now going to go off and reclaim those resources. Again, very important for this type of an environment because this is an environment where you're going to be renting space, right? You want to try to get the most out of it you possibly can. Do you want to try to do your quick demo and we'll see if we can end with the other one?
James, can I go hot?
So we want to show you real quick, I think we've got 10 minutes left. Yeah, 10 minutes left. So we want to try to show you real quick extending this into an AWS service.
Am I on?
You are not.
I'm not on. Can I be up? There we go. Awesome. Great. So, awesome stuff here. I alluded at the very beginning of this session that I was going to do a few things that were kind of a hybrid activity here.
You lost it again.
Yeah, this. There
you go.
We'll work with it.
You're back.
Kind of a hybrid scenario here where maybe I have some workloads running in VMware's side of VMware Cloud on AWS, but it's attached to some AWS services. So what I want to do here is I'm going to log in real quick to my vCenter if it's, okay, so I'm logged in. So as you can see here, this is VMware Cloud on AWS. It's the H5 client. I have the intercom support button in here, so if I need anything, John, Hendra, or Chris can help me out. And I've got all these virtual machines running. That's great. However, some scenarios, and I'm not going to tell you which scenarios and when you should do this. This is all going to come down to personal preference, how you already have your environment set up. But in this case, I have a front-end server running right here. It's called my VMworld photo server. Okay, it's just an Apache server. It's really having a couple issues here. Let's see if I can just twist this a little bit more. I have my front end running here, but for whatever reason, I want to run my database in Amazon RDS. Maybe it's that I can do some of the snapshots or backups. Whatever my business case is, I want to do that. So I'm going to actually jump over here to Amazon, and I'm going to go, you can see I've got my VPC. Now this is the VPC that's attached to that cloud SDDC. When I was going through the new SDDC deployments with you guys, you had to select a VPC. This is the one I chose when I deployed my vCenter, or my cloud SDDC. I'll go ahead and go to RDS. And RDS is, for those of you that don't do Amazon right now, RDS is essentially just a relational database service for you that you can run instances in. So if we go and we look at this, we can see I've got a SQL instance here. And if we look at some of the settings on here, I want to just touch on a couple of them. I know this may be a little small to see, but we have the endpoint ID here. This is the address that we'll use to connect my front end to the database. Okay? There's a few things I do want to point out here though. Okay, so another piece of information we need here is the database name, we need the username, and then we've got the security groups, which I'll talk about that here in just a second. But what I really want to touch on is this publicly accessible portion. Okay? Come on. Demo gods, keep me going here. Come on, come on. Here we go. All right. This public accessible says no. I cannot hit this from on-prem. I cannot hit this from another VPC within Amazon. However, because of the way VMware Cloud on AWS is set up, and the way that I have my security group.
Is it the HDMI cable?
I think so. I'm gonna try turning like this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Come on, come on, come on. All right. Because of the way I have my security groups, I can actually still work with, utilize, access this database from within VMware Cloud on AWS. So I'm not going to get into all the specifics of how our networking works right now. That's for another time. But the security group that's attached to this database says I can have inbound SQL traffic from the 107.188.128.112 subnet. That is the VPC that this resides in. Makes sense. What I also have here is I have the CIDR range for the port group that my VM is running on within VMware Cloud on AWS. This is smart enough to know and to do the routing internally across an ENI between AWS and our VMware Cloud on AWS account. So rather than going publicly through the internet, this is east-west traffic, cross VPC into my VMware SDDC. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with AWS, I'm sorry if some of this jargon is going over your head. I will have blogs and demos about this going forward after Barcelona. For those of you that are using AWS, I want to make sure that you understand, even though this is not publicly accessible, it can leverage an ENI through the back end into VMware Cloud on AWS. Okay? High bandwidth, low latency connection. Now, I'm going to go back to the page I was on.
5 minutes, so
okay.
I need like 3.
I'll give you 2.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to grab this really quick. I'm going to go to my front end right here called VMware Rocks. I'm going to put in my database host. Okay, my database username was VMC admin. I'm not giving you the password. And the database name, let's grab that really quickly. The database name was VMworld Pix database. Okay. So I can put this in. Now remember, this is on the VMware side. If I hit connect, it looks like it's running. Now, if I were to log in this top corner here, I could go in here and start uploading pictures, okay? See if this works. Now, what's important about this is all of a sudden, I no longer have to say all of my workloads are running on VMware or all of my workloads are running on Amazon. Vice versa, if I wanted to, I could have the database running in VMware and have EC2 instances for my front end that leverage Amazon's elastic load balancer and auto scaling, okay? For whatever reason, this is like a mix and match, all right? Let's see here. So really, how does this tie in with vRealize, Dave? Like, what is this going to do for the customer being able to split this up between technologies?
Sure. So
this is
other side. Okay, thanks. So from an operations standpoint, obviously we've over here. So you've sent something up to the cloud now, right? You've got your vSphere in the cloud, and now you've tied that vSphere in the cloud and your private data center with this Amazon instance, and you're thinking, well, I've lost complete visibility, I have no control, and the answer is no. We actually have the ability to look into those EC2 services or Amazon services to be able to pull that information into vRealize operations. So we have a number of different partners that work with us to build really great management packs. One of our partners, premier partners, is Blue Medora. If you've heard of them, if you haven't, please go to their website. They have hundreds and hundreds of management packs that really help. In this particular example, we have a management pack for Amazon RDS. So if I click on Amazon RDS, I can actually bring up those Amazon RDS environments. Right? So I happen to be in the East region, and in the East region I have a number of different instances. I have an Oracle instance, Postgres instance, MySQL instance, and a SQL Server instance. So each of these are being pulled in because I've connected vRealize operations and that management pack into my Amazon services. Right? So I can get visibility to each of those.
So what you're saying is you can control VMware on-prem, VMware Cloud on AWS, and your AWS resources all from within vRealize. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cool.
Correct. So you can see there's an alert here on one of these. If I click on that particular alert, you can see that one of the databases, the SQL Server database, has been experiencing more than its normal share of deadlocks. If I go ahead and go forward, you can see, yeah, there's a bit of a spike in the amount of deadlocks I've got. I can then drill into more details. So right now I'm looking at it from a regional standpoint and an RDS standpoint, and I can actually go into the actual RDS environment instances themselves. Right? So click on my SQL Server, and I can see the specific details for that SQL Server, the number of database connections, etc.
1 minute.
If I continue, I can drill into the next level as well. Skip fast forward this. And I can actually use the Microsoft SQL Server management pack now. So I'm leaving kind of the Amazon pieces. I've looked at the RDS, I've looked at the RDS instances, everything seems to be running okay there, everything seems to be green. Now I can actually get information on the SQL Server environment itself. The end of this demo, and I'm going to have to stop it here because we have 45 seconds, can be seen down at the booth. I'd be happy to meet some folks down there if you want to see it offline. But basically, we get down to the point of not only looking at the SQL Server database itself, its information, its specific details, etc., but also down to the actual query level. So I can actually bring up a bunch of queries and say, look, these are the queries that are causing the deadlocks. Somebody's obviously dropped an index, dropped a table, changed a view, something. Right? So again, this isn't something that maybe the database administrator would use, but something you could use to have an intelligent conversation with him. The goal of this is that we're not losing visibility, even though things have gone either into VMware Cloud and AWS or into the Amazon services realm.
So with that being said, really tying all this together full circle, we really hope that you'll take a look at VMware Cloud on AWS, what that provides for you, and just even the possibilities of how you can integrate with your on-prem, with VMware Cloud on AWS and AWS services to achieve this, this hybridity that people have been wanting for so long while using vRealize. And with that, we've had a blast. Thank you so much for your time and have a great rest of your VMworld.
Yep, please fill out the survey.